Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Tuesday Postgraduate Academy Support Group meeting. It's wonderful to be here and to have the Student Support Services team on hand again. And this team will be hosting a very special session in a new block for this September-October month. In which we feature discussions about roadblocks to personal and academic success. Our topic today will be addressing the impact of addictive behaviors. So I noticed a few new names, new regular names. Just going to go through our brief introduction, a reminder of how casual and interactive our sessions are. Please feel free to comment in the chat box or raise your hand if you'd like to raise a point to be part of the discussion. Use your reaction icons. We really, really appreciate interaction within this community. And if you are feeling a little uncomfortable expressing yourself within the chat box, by all means, please do send myself, Sue or Wooly from the SSS team a message with anonymously, a private message, and then we will relay your message anonymously within the group. And with that, I'm going to hand over to the Student Support Services team to introduce this topic. Hello, Sue and Willie.
Hi, Lindy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So I know that connectivity might be a bit of a challenge for lots of us. And so if we are experiencing challenges, if you experience challenges in hearing me, I do apologize. We'll do our best to allow the session to come through to you as best as we possibly can. Thank you for joining us today, the beginning of sessions that are dedicated to assisting you in terms of removing some of the roadblocks that you might personally encounter in this journey that you're currently embarking on. And our first topic is looking at addressing the impact of addictive behavior. And before we move into that, just to share that the topic is very diverse, and we will bring to you a range of aspects around addictive behavior. And we are hoping to create awareness on this, because the moment we hear the words addictive behavior, we immediately start thinking alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, etc. And we immediately also distance ourselves from assuming that, okay, we're not party to an addictive behavior tendency. So hopefully through the session, we would unpack addictive behaviors fully, but we want to also share with you sufficient information and knowledge that even when you are working in your teams, with your peers, with your loved ones, family, roommates, friends, in those circles, you might also come across experiencing some kind of addictive tendencies. And the session is about empowering you and also allowing you to be able to sufficiently support yourself as well as people that you love through an addictive behavior that could impact on their lives. So thank you. I hope you're going to enjoy this also. It's a very interactive session. Like Lanine said, we really would like for us to engage in conversations on this topic, which is very broad and very diverse. Thank you. Over to you, Sue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Will. So I am going to be switching off my video just to help a little bit with my bandwidth. But if you would like to see me every now and then, just say hi in the chat space, switch on the video. I'll be very happy to share. So yeah, if you could define what this concept of addictive behavior is, what would you say are the words or the qualities that we would use to define an addictive behavior? So and Woody said it so beautifully. We all associate addiction with that the common terms of using substances like alcohol and nicotine. So just share with us a little bit about how would you define what is an addictive behavior? Take a moment, pop it in the chat, maybe jot it down on a piece of paper, and if you feel brave enough, do unmute and share with us. And we can, as we are allowing you to think a little bit about this definition, I am just going to mention that we all know that behavioral addiction is real, it's tough, and it can be just as devastating, it has devastating effects on our life as any other addiction. So yes, Lenine.
I'm sorry, I just have a question about addictive behavior. Is it always negative, or are some addictive behaviors considered positive?
Good question. And I think that's definitely in terms of our definition, how we define it. And it would definitely allude to whether it is a negative or a positive type of behavior. Absolutely. So we've got a couple of responses. We've got a mental and physiological dependence on a certain lifestyle. So it's a way of living and the type of connection or dependence on that behavior for either a spin-off mentally or physically. And then we've got anything that creates a dependency. So there's keywords, dependency, with the potential to cause self-harm. These are really good definitions. And I think if we have to think a little bit more, addictive behavior is any behavior that a person compulsively engages in and has difficulty controlling or stopping despite the negative consequences. So we're looking at addictive behavior from that negative lens. But I do think some of our behaviors can be positive behaviors, but the consequences are negative. So I think it's definitely important that when we're looking at our behaviors, addictive becomes prominent in that definition when it is a compulsion, where there is a dependency, where there is difficulties in managing the behaviors, and it can definitely cause problems to our life, as well as how we work through things on a daily basis. So for example, an addiction can convince someone to prioritize that over every other task or thing that they need to be engaged in, over people, over things, over places, and it results in compromising many things in our lives. And then behavioral addictions can be defined as an intense desire to repeat some action that can be pleasurable or perceived to improve well-being, or capable of alleviating some personal stress, with that positive consequence in mind. Definitely. But to what extent? So I'm just thinking a little bit out loud, what is it? What does it look like when we're defining this? Where will it most likely occur? In what kind of spaces? And I think when we're looking at our addictions, we're thinking of the extremes right now. I'm wondering, are we thinking about the major addictions, or are we thinking a little bit about the smaller addictions? What is your addiction as we're starting to unpack this addiction? What would you quantify as your addictive behavior? It can be something small, it can be something big, but I just want us to start thinking a little bit about how we perceive our own addictions. And I see that, behavior experts, they argue that anything that stimulates a person or impacts their dopamine center, that's the reward center part of the brain, can become addictive. So any addiction.
So that's what I just wanted to add to this introduction, in the sense that, I think we believe that an addiction is always easy to spot. And, if we've come across a person and we see lots of empty bottles in the room, or we can get a whiff of alcohol or nicotine, like you say. We assume an addiction, but in reality, behavioral addictions can be quite deceptive in nature, because one might not realize that we actually are addicted to a behavior, such as, for example, shopping or even working. It's stuff that we tend to conduct religiously, regularly. We complete on a daily basis without giving much thought to it. So it can creep up onto us without us really recognizing it as an addiction.
Absolutely, and we've got someone that posted in the chat space, and I think many of us can resonate with that. Regular coffee drinking. Yeah, and I think we get involved in these activities, these behaviors, because of that reward center, that reward experience that we gain from that behavior. And we tend to, it becomes an addiction when we tend to do something as a way to kind of distract ourselves or to soothe ourselves. So that pleasurable kind of aspects to those activities.
And so to add to what Lenine asked us earlier when she
Yes.
spoke about, is it possible, could it be, does it always have to be negative? And I think the fact that we actually do not realize an activity has become an addiction in our lives, it can sometimes, there is like with coffee drinking, it can be characterized by this compulsion to continually engage in this activity or behavior or tendency, and not recognize or realize whether there is a negative consequence of this action.
Absolutely. And I think, when you spoke about that, I thought of this habit, when it becomes an obligation, that's when it becomes a hindrance, where it kind of impacts your daily functioning, the way in which you would normally do things. I'm just thinking that first cup of coffee in the morning, we believe we can only function once we have that cup, the cup of joe. I think, we might drag our feet, and then boom, we drink that cup of coffee and we feel instantly energized. Meanwhile, it's just the association that we have made through this habitual kind of behavior. And it results in that type of consequence. And I think there are many factors that will influence the development of an addiction. It can be, that stress reactivity that we have, or we deem our behavioral activity to be a coping strategy, or it assists us in achieving our goals. It could even aid in the feeling that we have about ourselves, encourage a positive or a better emotional state about ourselves, or the connections we make with people. So yeah, there are many factors that will influence the development of an addiction. I'm just thinking the spaces that we also find ourselves in can also encourage certain behaviors. And yeah, I see we've so far only have one shared addiction. So yeah, do share with us, what type of addictions are you engaging in? And I'm thinking for myself, I'm addicted to solitaire, playing a card game. It's just okay. We've got food, certain types of food, definitely. I'm sure some will say chocolate as well, along with the breads, tasty breads. And I think, having heard our definitions and yeah, I think it's important that we identify our tendencies that can be regarded as an addictive behavior. We've got peanuts, eating peanuts. And I think we are forced to also kind of look at what we're gaining from these addictive behaviors. Approval addiction, drinking Coke. Absolutely, sugar is a massive addiction. approval addiction. We even have other addictions that's shared that speaks to perhaps even exercise. Entertainment on social media, non-science Instagram posts. Thank you for sharing.
So Sue's asking and challenging us to look at the different types of addictions that could possibly be around, and even if it is not an addiction that you wanting to share personally, it could be something that you become aware of with loved ones around you. And I think the idea here is to sort of unpack and understand the kinds of behavioral addictions that does surround us in our social spaces, etc. And one of the things that we are trying to, we hoping to achieve is some sense of self-introspection, looking deep into yourself and asking these uncomfortable questions as to what am I doing out of probably a habit without giving much thought to it, that's not really serving me well, that's not really adding value to my life. What are the activities or that I tend to spend too much of time doing that's not really serving me the way I'd like it to serve me? And we have entertainment on social media. We have someone that shared approval addiction.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking a little bit beyond this, like what's those consequences of these types of addictions? And at this moment, we're speaking about not just the ones that pop into your head right now, things that kind of, you know, like you say, become habitual and either have these consequences on how we address things in the workspace, in our academics, and it results in, you know, a certain type of behaviors. I'm thinking, what's the words now? Like where you've got a bond with someone and you're trying to develop that bond, where we're speaking to the approval addictions. I think I'll remember it just now. But it's kind of like you're always wanting to people please and you're giving of yourself, and there's a consequence to always giving of yourself. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. So I think, you know, when we're speaking about the types of addictions, we can have more than just one behavioral addiction. Some addictions will be smaller than others, and others can be massive. They can be big. They can be diagnosable. And I think when we're looking at these common forms of behavioral addictions, we tend to kind of become a little conscious of how we're managing these things, because you know, we're having to manage the stigmas associated with these behavioral addictions, whereas these smaller ones we kind of negotiate and say to ourselves, it's only a small addiction, but it encourages a habitual lifestyle that can be unhelpful, that can be negative. And I think Woolie's found something really really nice that speaks to how a behavioral addiction can develop. And I think what's really lovely is when we're unpacking how these can develop, whether it's the approval addictions, the pornography addictions, the, you know, types of foods that we eat, the games we play, the associations we make with social media. I think it's really important to kind of just build an awareness around how this happened.
So I think we can move on to, you know, having unpacked some of the behavioral addictions that we generally identify within ourselves and people around us. And in order to be able to move forward from just identify, of course, self-introspection is important. And then to determine, okay, so why do I do this? What, you know, I mean, and we need to find out what drives this addiction. So in other words, it's actually determining where this is coming from. And very often it is found there's been research on this topic, which has shared that often an addictive behavior or an addiction to some kind of lifestyle is associated with a particular need of some sort. So so if we look at this little flow diagram in terms of how a behavioral addiction can develop, we're needing to look at what's driving this need for me to continue. So whether it's social media, whether it is drinking excessive amounts of coffee, whether it is gambling, where does this need stem from? What is it I'm trying to actually fill within myself? And so if we use the example of, a trauma that has led for you to find, led to this addictive behavior, which to an extent sorts of pacifies the way you're feeling, gives you a feeling of comfort, etc. Then this would tend to, to lead to this trauma creates this kind of longing to continue, this tendency to assist you from experiencing those feelings. Okay, so a behavior that temporarily meets this longing and tends to provide a distraction tends to become a coping mechanism for us. I'm not sure if that's making sense. So, and this flow diagram goes on to share with us that if an individual begins to experience negative consequences from this behavior, we could actually either we could go into two different streams. Okay, so we can actually develop this addiction where our brain tends to justify this behavior, believing it necessary for us to go on, to survive, and then we continue this behavior despite the negative consequences this could have on us. So for example, we'll go back to the coffee example. It might give you a sense of comfort. You might feel a sense of renewed energy after that coffee, whatever it could be. And so we tend to justify that, okay, I'm feeling a bit drained now. I think I'm going to go and grab myself a cup of coffee. Anything in excess, and I think this is what this topic is alluding to, that anything in excess cannot possibly be good for us. So, yeah. So can we just go to the next slide?
Absolutely. And I think I'm thinking as you're unpacking this, I'm thinking, well, my addictions that I picked up, my solitaire gaming addiction, I was thinking, well, is it really an addiction if I'm using it as a coping strategy, using that flow chart? Yeah.
So the last bullet on that flow chart spoke to, an individual stops engaging in the behavior once the negative consequences begins piling up. So how often, for example, we look at people having excessive amounts of coke or an unhealthy diet, eating incorrectly. We tend to binge eat, for example. And there's a limit to being able to justify that behavior. But when we notice the negative impact that this has on us, or, it could be social media sites and stealing away our time. And if we look at being involved in this rigid or stringent academic program and requiring more time is something that we actually need right now. But if we engage in activities that are taking away this time, that is when we would actually look at stop engaging in the behavior once we realize the consequences it has on us. And whether it is in our academic journey, whether it's in our health and our well-being, whether it is impacting on our loved ones and the people around us being impacted on negatively because of our tendency to probably overshop, for example, and having a limited amount of financial means within the home. The impact is far-reaching, and this could allow us to have this insight and probably look at engaging in stopping this kind of addictive behavior. So that was quite a mouthful, but I was trying to share how it starts and how it continues, and how we can actually, with introspection and the impact it has on our lifestyle, look at changing where we are.
Absolutely. And I like what you're saying, and this flowchart shows it so beautifully. It's that insight we develop, that decision to stop engaging in that behavior versus just encouraging that behavior from continuing and becomes unhelpful. And we've got these 4 questions that speak to exactly how to develop that introspection, really unpacking, do I have an addiction behavior? So these 4 questions read, do I feel like I need to engage in this behavior to function or feel happy? Do I feel like I'm addicted to this behavior? Is this behavior negatively impacting my life or the lives of those around me? Do I feel like I'm powerless to stop this behavior on my own? And those questions definitely unpack whether you're justifying the behavior versus making steps to actually putting a stop into that behavior. Thank you for sharing, Willie. Absolutely. And I think, we're speaking to the impact of our addictions on our daily functioning. And I think, as we said, that cup of coffee, without it, we can't start the day. So there's those short-term effects in our addictive behaviors, like changes in appetite, our mood, our cognitive functioning, and even to the long-term effects where there's the extremes, memory loss, possible overdose, morbidity, organ damage to the extremes. There's also even physical changes that occur, our ability to make decisions, to learn, to recall information from memory. We also even see influencing our compulsions and destructive behaviors, making uninformed decisions, putting ourselves at risk. Making poor decisions around our social behaviors, or responding inappropriately in social settings, influencing our work performance and our relationships. So the same happens in terms of our mental health. We see a shift in our well-being to the negative. Essentially, there's a massive impact on our daily functioning when we engage in an addiction. And what kind of happens is all of these things kind of become a caps lock experience. They kind of build, and over time they become bigger and bigger and bigger, and they start showing themselves in how we are functioning on a daily basis. Because you're spending more time engaging in that behavior, or you're excessively thinking about when you're going to do it next. You're finding it difficult to regulate yourself by not engaging in that behavior. And you're experiencing those unpleasant feelings or sensations when you're trying to stop, kind of like a withdrawal. But essentially there's a consequence, and it's going to feel like all of those symptoms on our well-being become accentuated on caps lock kind of concept. You'll also start noticing you'll be taking increased risks. You're having to spend more time to recover from not engaging in those activities. You're prioritizing other things over your personal hygiene or work tasks. So I think it's just important to know whether it is within ourselves or our family or our friends who are engaging, just kind of build that awareness around what symptoms will be accentuated in that addiction behavior. I kind of get told I want to spend more time on my phone and in social settings, and I think I'm such a true introvert. And the answer is yes, I do. Go for it, Wills.
So at this point, I'm just thinking in terms of the slide before this, that it would really be nice to for the participants that are on this chat with us to look at what have they recognized as some of the impacts their addictive behavior could be having on their well-being or their life in general. Like you say, it's like we are on caps lock, and And I think being able to identify this would be really, really wonderful.
Absolutely agree with you. And I think you spoke about something like wasting time. So you're losing out on time to do meaningful things. More meaningful.
So on the next slide, you spoke about a symptom. So, you know, so this is something I'm wondering whether we could identify, you know, what's like on caps lock for us. What are some of the symptoms, the impact, the effects we are experiencing?
I love that question. So those of you that have spoken to food or relationships or engaging on social medias, you know, what are the symptoms that you're noticing while engaging in those daily activities that bordering on kind of addictive behaviors that are unhelpful?
So whilst we're thinking, I could think of an example of someone that's very close to me that really loves exercising, and exercising generally is something we would encourage everyone to be, you know, to include in as part of their daily routine. However, when the exercise, in my opinion, when the exercise becomes a task that has that you would feel your day is incomplete and you cannot get on with any other activities, or you have no other activities because it's all about this exercise program that you have to get into, then it tends to impact on how productive the rest of your day is actually panning out to be. Unless you're making a career out of the exercising, of course, you know. So for me, that could somewhat be defined as an addiction, as an addictive behavior.
Absolutely. It becomes an obsession with engaging in that activity.
Yes, that's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. So it's become an obsession to the point that nothing else matters. As the day has got to have a huge part filled with this exercise activity. So yeah, I'm just wondering, and I okay, so I see there are some shares in the chat space. So and so someone says, David says, less concentration on important work due to social media distractions. And also further to that says, poor rate of achieving key milestones due to approval addiction.
Absolutely.
And I think that's
I'm thinking about, posting an image on Facebook and you're waiting for the likes to come through, and you're compulsively going every 5 minutes looking to see who's given you that like or who's made a comment, and you kind of get caught up in wanting, some type of approval, and when you're not getting the approval from the certain person that you're wanting from, because a lot of the time there is a particular need and approval from a particular type of person, you kind of feel having the consequence of I'm feeling worthless or not important, and your self-esteem gets a knock.
Absolutely. And I wanted to pick up on exactly that because it's come up several times. And obviously, I think it's something we should focus on, approval addiction, because if it is something we are grappling with, and this so resonates with me because somehow or the other, when you don't hear and you don't receive that approval, it tends to create anxiety. And obviously this anxiety now then, is like the baseline for spiraling lots of other aspects out of context for you. So I think it is so important to actually recognize that this is, to ask ourselves a question. So seeking this approval has become so important for me. And the person that I actually want to, to sort of just help me through this, it's not really important to that person. So how do we cope with this?
And I'm thinking, imagine a life where this addictive behavior is better managed. How different will your life be? Yeah. Imagine a life
Exactly.
where, yeah,
Mm.
I wasn't sure if I heard.
So there's some things that's within our control, and there's some things that's outside of our control, right? And I think, and that speaks to, and I think somewhere along the line, we are going to talk about a bit of the cognitive behavior therapy and how that can impact on how we actually manage these kinds of stresses that we experience. Because I think this kind of approval can actually become a stressor for us beyond, so, and I think we're going to unpack that a little bit as we go on.
Absolutely. And it's going to influence how you make decisions around better managing that, or hoping to make decisions to better manage the addictions. So we've got someone that's shared with us, I'm a non-smoker for over 10 years now. I enjoyed the social aspect of it. Absolutely. It's where kind of views that smokers meet smokers' opportunity to network, and but there you've got the associated consequences, the dependency on the nicotine, the impact on our health and our pocket. And they exclaimed, wow, and the smell eventually had me stopping. Well, congratulations on making that decision. And I'm wondering, how did you manage that transition from, I've got this addiction, I need to better manage it. How did I get to live that productive, flourishing lifestyle that you have now? So I'm conscious of that. And then I've got Anonymous saying, how do we differentiate between our daily activities and addictive behaviors? Such a good question. And I think a daily activity will become an addictive behavior when you compulsively think about only doing that thing and unable to move to the next task, or kind of feel, like Willie said, incomplete, like something is missing when not engaging in it. So it's the type of association we have with that behavior. It becomes a negative or a bad habit. Another post, engaging in social or community activities addiction has a greater extent on this person's life and their work performance, due to the fact that these behaviors are self-reinforcing. Absolutely. We need to stop and be assertive. And I like how you're thinking about it. How are we going to make that transition? How are we going to better manage? How are we going to find a life where this addictive behavior is better managed, where you're able to live a different life, feeling in control, feeling that you can be successful, that you can actually start looking after yourself? Yes, Will?
So exactly that. I love the last comments that were made, and I think it all comes down to finding this balance in life, and also being comfortable to say I don't have to engage in this activity to this extent. I can give so much of me to each activity that's required. So not burning yourself out in an activity. And I think the most important aspect here is the realization that I am giving too much of me into this activity, and it's not adding value to the rest of my life. So everything in moderation is great. You can do anything, but I think everything in moderation is critical. And exactly that, self-awareness, self-introspection, the impact it's having on me, impact it's having on people around me, the consequences that this is having on me. Obviously, if I'm giving too much of myself into community activities, it's taking up too much of my time. Consequences are that I have less time for the very important things that I have to get done in my day. So
absolutely. So Willie, I'm thinking, now that we've all identified one of our addictive behaviors, or a behavior that can be regarded as something hindering our performance, our lifestyle, our ability to flourish in life, I'm wondering, how are we going to what can we put into place to kind of resist getting caught up in these behaviors? And we've got someone that said, I stopped smoking cold turkey a couple of times, but we definitely need support. When I got my partner to stop with me and commit, it's stuck. We're still together, still both strong non-smokers. It's not for us anymore, despite some of the people around us are continuing. And I think that's exactly it. Having someone on your team, setting that clear goal and guideline with a partner, with an accountability partner, definitely makes it stick.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very critical point, and that's going to bring us to the next points in terms of how important it is to have that support system.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think, there is no one solution that that will provide an answer. And it's going to be a combination of things, but definitely a support team is always needed when you're looking at changing a behavior or a habit that would encourage a certain type of behavior.
So let me just share with you, like Sue has on the slide. She talks to 10 ways to support someone that is recovering, or to support ourselves, through a behavioral addiction. And the first one is certainly about open dialogue, and this is what we are encouraging here, helping you to introspect and have a sense of clear self-awareness as to where am I in terms of this particular topic. So even if you're working with your loved ones, allow people that are going through this to basically be able to share what they are going through. It's fine. Allow yourself as well to be, vulnerable to yourself. And if others are actually sharing with you, it's also great to just listen without making, judgment. So this dialogue is so important. If you could tell your loved one that they can be honest with you, but you also must be prepared to hear their stories, and these stories, and hear yourself as well. Be honest with yourself. The truth in it might be shocking, but be prepared to listen and be ready to experience how insidious this addiction can actually be. And the second point we talk about is, learn and process together, very much what Lenine shared now. An addiction involves not only the individual, but also those close in their community. The whole family, or even an intimate friend, needs to go through the healing process as well. So instead of expecting your loved one to carry the weight of the recovery alone, or even for you to carry this alone, ask yourself, how can the whole family, how can your whole team take on this addiction? How can our entire group of friends support one another through this? Sometimes, and we're going to talk about, options in terms of treatment, therapy, and self-management tips. But sometimes seeing a therapist is important if one can afford it, or even joining a support group is also quite something that one can look at. The third point we talk about is, don't come to the rescue. And what this means is that very often friends and families in particular want to solve their loved ones' problems and shield them from the consequences of the addiction. However, this kind of behavior actually only serves to support the addiction. So instead of doing this, setting parameters that demonstrates love and accountability, rather vocalize that, this might sound something like, I love you, but I cannot finance this addiction. Or you can live here, but I do not want you to play those video games in my home. Or I don't mind the gymming, but I think you also need to focus on other important areas of your life. So rather than stopping the activity and rescuing the person, offer suitable alternatives. A fourth point we talk about is take up a new activity together. And so Lenine shared with us, working together with a partner So do something together that does not involve talking about the addiction. Learn to play chess, do other activities together, find new hobbies together. This is a time about developing trust and rapport with the support system. In this way, when the conversation about the addictive behavior or the tendencies become too difficult, we can actually be distracted and by cultivating a new connection through other activities. Changing the environment, getting out of the house can relieve the built-up pressure and tension one can experience. You don't have to go far, just far enough away from any place that can trigger your or your loved one's addiction. Go for a drive, take a walk around the neighborhood. Both scenarios will help you, allow you to talk side by side instead of face to face, which can also ease the anxiety around being vulnerable. We speak of checking in, and I think Sue touched on that earlier. Friends and family often say, if you need anything, I'm here. How often do you hear that? Whilst that is helpful, this kind of message puts the burden on the person that's going through this addiction to sort of ask for support, and unfortunately, individuals that are recovering from an addiction are often less likely to reach out for help when they need support the most. Rather put the onus on yourself. Instead, by calling or sending a message on an open-ended question, rather ask, how are you doing today? Be prepared to hear answers that are positive or negative. Or also offer a supportive voice and, say, hey, I'm here. I'm thinking about you. That can actually help to encourage the person to reach out. We got as point number 7, follow up after checking in. If a loved one tells you today they are not doing well, follow up tomorrow. Ask, how was today? Are you feeling any better today? Your consistency will certainly reassure the person that you remember and you care. As much as possible, avoid checking in once and never again. Also remember that looking up someone's social media does not replace a personal connection. It's very easy to, to get away with social media today and feel that we're connected. But really, I think that is not a personal connection that a person that's dealing with an addiction or working through an addiction needs right now. Personal contact is critical. Notice addictive patterns and gently point them out. If you notice unhealthy patterns starting to creep into your loved one's behavior, consider pointing this out. Be calm and be gentle. Avoid making judgmental statements about the behavior. For example, instead of, I see you exercising 3 times a day, and, you shouldn't do that. Rather, for example, if you notice your friend always spends an hour shopping online before a health appointment, flag that behavior to them. Suggest an alternative activity that you could do together, such as before you go to the doctor, maybe you and I could go for a walk instead and talk about how you are feeling. Or we can just spend some time and relax together. So in this way, you're actually noticing an addictive pattern that is arising, but you are gently trying to reroute the person onto a healthier direction. Try not to be the addiction police. Monitoring addictive behavior, whether it's a bank statement, time online, or cell phone data usage, or the amount of time spent exercising or going to the gym, monitoring of this can actually come across as punitive and not supportive. Okay, so for someone who's already gone down that road and realized that I need to make some adjustment, you need to be able to share that, show your trust rather than judging. You need to help develop healthy boundaries and positive goals towards this recovery. You do not need to cross-examine them or second-guess their actions. Okay. And I think this goes for all of us, for you who could be working through an addiction or supporting a loved one through an addiction. Taking care of yourself is critical. Sometimes when we are too close to a family member or friend and we're supporting them through this, we tend to forget that we also need to take care of ourselves in the process. And this reminds me of something so important that happened this weekend, where a student reached out for support for a friend, and because we were not really readily available to support the person that was going through the crisis. This particular student took on a lot, and when I finally got to the student, I said to the student, help is on its way to the student, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. However, I think you would benefit by coming in and just sharing your experience and helping me to take you through that journey for caring for yourself as well. So I think this was a mouthful, but each one of these 10 points are relevant to us, whether we are coping through an addictive behavior or helping a loved one come through an addictive behavior. I'm not sure if there's any questions. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking of like, if this could be a standard 10 points to shift a bad habit or an unhelpful habit into, something that would be better, instead of, we would definitely be showing ourselves and others that kindness and compassion, be supportive, and never giving up on ourselves and the person we're with, if we're supporting someone. I hope that makes sense. I'm not thinking as there are questions that come through, I'm just thinking, how do we make these, the decision to make this shift, whether it is supporting someone or ourselves? Absolutely. And I think it's Willie, your 10 points definitely speaks to making those positive lifestyle choices. I'm just waiting to see if anyone had a comment or a question on those 10 points. And it's also about making those wise choices. And we all have now, the what do you call it, the framework of what is needed to make that shift, that necessary shift.
Yeah, and I like the word you use, lifestyle choices, because this is exactly what this is all about. And when we talk about making better decisions or decision making or problem solving, we seem to take we seem to take that for granted, that we will make decisions that's somehow automatic. However, it's decision making must be a lot more deliberate. And even though we're making decisions from the time we wake up to the time we sleep every single day, around 100 different aspects, I think when it comes to our lifestyle, it calls for us to be really wise about forcing ourselves to make better choices. And I think, and I think we must just talk a little bit about how do we make better choices and decisions, that impact us positively.
Absolutely. And I think we owe ourselves to be in a headspace that will create better decision making. And this what we've got here, and Willie's definitely going to be interjecting, because I'm sure I'm going to forget something because we're running out of time. We find ourselves in a situation, and we have a perception of the situation, and that is what will encourage a way of being, a behavior, and as a consequence we feel a particular way. So if we're feeling overwhelmed, or we have a particular outlook on a situation, we're going to procrastinate, we're going to drag our feet, we're going to feel that behave in a particular way that's going to make us feel we're not capable, we're not competent, we're not good enough. and it then encourages unhelpful further behaviors like, okay, I'm just going to go and eat 6 chocolate bars because I'm not feeling good. And then in my thoughts are, it gets reinforced. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. So it's that continuous cycle. So imagine if we can just slow this process down just a little bit so that we can make a better decision. And the role of our thoughts and this internal dialogue, it's absolutely powerful. The role should be to encourage ourselves to, make a better decision about or perspective, or kind of it's like a red flag. It's a situation we find ourselves in, and to kind of say to ourselves, what is the truth in where I'm finding myself in? What thought pattern is influencing this? Is it a negative thought? Is it a cognitive distortion? And actually challenging it from that level. The situation may make me feel a particular way, but is that the truth? So this is just one aspect. You can use journaling, you can use a thought diary to unpack these things. And with that, you ask yourself, well, what do I want instead? What I'm feeling right now, it's saying that I'm overwhelmed. Yes, there's a lot of things to do. So let me strategize. Let me work on one thing at a time. And I implement a goal and I implement a strategy to overcome that. And when I have a goal, when I have a strategy, point 1, 2, and 3, I kind of feel a little more in control of my life. When I feel a little more in control of my life, I kind of start feeling a little happier in doing the difficult tasks. So there's a certain consequence of that. So yes, you can maybe perhaps engage in some journaling to kind of understand what led to this habit or addictive behavior or a way of lifestyle, and just kind of reframing that, gaining an insight into that. Yes, Willie.
No, that's fine. I'm glad that I just wanted to marry that into the fact that the previous slide that, and I'm mindful of the time as well, that in life we will always be experiencing many different situations and events. And that is probably what also drives, and we know that it drives the way we think and we feel and the way we behave. And in order to be able to be more proactive and to make those healthy lifestyle choices, we got to take a moment, step aside when a situation or event occurs in our lives before just allowing our thoughts to take over, because a negative thought is going to lead to a negative feeling, lead to a negative emotion, and lead to us behaving in a way that's not going to be healthy and positive. So in between the situation and the event, and in between the thinking and thought process, take some time to actually unpack what does this situation mean for me? Is it internal, within my control? Is it outside of my control? And this is where some of our decision-making skills can come in, that can prompt us to start feeling better about the situation. And immediately, when we feel better, we would behave in a more positive manner as well. So yeah. I just wanted to, and I'm coming back to, wanting that approval constantly, interjecting at that point. If you don't get that approval, help yourself to prevent it from growing into you feeling your self-esteem being deflated, etc. Look at it differently.
And in that process, you also eliminate the judgment. And you eliminate the future fears, the regrets and the shames of the past. And it's this whole, positive consequence of doing that. And I think, if we work towards the end of our conversation, I'm thinking, coping with this behavioral addiction, the unhelpful activities, it's a daily pursuit. Some days will be more challenging than others. And just remind yourself, every day is a recovery day. Spend 5 less minutes every day on that cell phone or on that account. You can recover from this. We said it in the beginning, honesty is definitely key. Honesty with yourself and how you feel, what you need and what you want from every activity. So it's kind of making those decisions around what can you gain from engaging in that habit. So you kind of break the cycle that we've established. So it's you're going to start seeing you're going to have slightly more time to do the fun things in life, time to maybe just sit and enjoy, a little bit of the quiet time. You'll see a shift in your well-being, in your relationships, your finances, and perhaps even future goals and your progress at work. And with that being said, we know that we won't be able to, make a change all instantly, and it's going to take time. We have a lot of stresses in our lives, so be kind, be compassionate with yourself. You do have a team available for you. We are student support services, and I am going to share in the chat space how to get hold of us. For those of you that are listening in, you are most welcome to email us on chs.sss@ukzn.ac.za, and I'm going to hand over to Willie to just also maybe any final words, and Lenine, our host for the session today. And I see she's mentioned some stuff in the chat space.
So thank you, Sue. I think we started off this block by looking at roadblocks, and in your journey. And I think it's always a critical topic. It's something that we don't really engage with. We take a lot for granted as we journey daily through all the responsibilities and roles that we got to fulfill. We somehow tend to forget about some of the stuff that's really glaring at us. And I think that today's session was just important to create a sense of self-awareness. Awareness for you, but also the impact that this has on the people around you, but also how to love and support your loved ones in the process as well. The ultimate picture was about roadblocks to your academic success and our personal success. So yeah, so I do hope that we were able to unpack this topic as to the extent that we had hoped to. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to chat with us. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you so much, Willie, and thank you so much, Sue, for being here today, both of you. I put in the chat box earlier that this really has been such a reflective session, this focus on introspection, thinking about your own addictions and how you manage that, thinking about addictions in others and how you are managing, helping them to manage, or how you are coping with their addictions, and how it's impacting yourself. It's really been... I've been quiet this time because I've been thinking so much about the content. So thank you very much for all the information that you imparted to us today. And thank you to the participants for being so involved in the chat space. So it's really been a very, very good, very informative session, and quite apt for this oncoming month of mental health awareness. And I believe our next session is related to wait, what is that? Oh, that's right. Oh my goodness. Self-harm. Yes, within mental health and wellness, self-harm, suicide ideation, suicide awareness. There's a wonderful segue to that as well. Thank you again, the SSS team. See, your information is in the chat box, so we do know how to get hold of you. chs.sss@ukzn.ac.za. Thank you again for being with us today. And with that, goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.